Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're back in X-Plane 11 and this time we'll be in the Flight Factor A320. I decided to pick up a few presents for myself during the Christmas sales, one of which being the Flight Factor A320. So today we're going to take the aircraft on a short test flight from Dublin over to London Heathrow. So the plan for this morning's flight then, we'll be operating an Aer Lingus A320 call sign Shamrock 158. We're currently parked at Dublin's Terminal 2. We'll push back from here, we'll depart on the Dexon 1 Alpha departure, make our way over to London at flight level 370, arriving on the Bovenden 1 Bravo arrival for the ILS 27 left. It's a pretty cold, wet and miserable morning here in Dublin, and the weather isn't a whole lot better in London. The cloud base this morning at London Heathrow is around 500 feet, so good enough for the Cat 1 ILS. The weather's slightly nicer at Gatwick, which is our alternate this morning. However, with it being Heathrow and the weather not being too sharp, I've elected to take an extra tonne of fuel, which gives us roughly an extra 30 minutes for holding if we need it. We have a very light loading this morning, only around 40 passengers on board the aircraft, and we'll be taking a block fuel of 5.8 tonnes. I have to say I'm really looking forward to this flight. All I've seen so far of the Flight Factor A320 was the little that I experienced whilst getting the aircraft set up, but even from the little that I've seen so far, the aircraft looks like a really great add-on. Anyway, much more importantly, I do hope that you enjoy the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them down in the comments section below. But now let's jump into the cockpit of the Flight Factor A320 and get the aircraft ready to go. So good morning and welcome to a very wet and cold morning here in Dublin. We've just completed the pushback. We'll run the before start checklist below the line. So harness secure, ATC set, windows doors closed, beacon on, thrust levers idle, and the park brake is on. It's the before start checklist complete. So we'll get the engines fired up, engine start selector to ignition start, engine 1 start. And there we have N2 spooling up. As you can see, as I say, a pretty wet morning here. There's sheets of rain rolling across the tarmac. Temperature's -1, so we must be just on the threshold between a bit of rain or a bit of snow. But we'll definitely require some engine anti-ice for the departure this morning. So, EGT's coming up, as is the N1.
Taxi at Delta November, caution the Ryanair on Delta Sierra, full throttling 6.
And just waiting for the engine to stabilise. There we go, it's available. Good start on engine 1. Engine 2 start.
16 QNH 0987, thanks for Pascal.
Just hear the PTU screeching away behind us. And again we have N2 rotation. EGT's coming up. And the M1 starting to spool up. I'd say we'll talk more about it in the air of course, but I'm really impressed with the Flight Factor A320 so far. It seems to be very well modelled and it's a very immersive aircraft. Certainly significantly better than any of the other payware Airbuses that I've tried in any sim so far.
Taxi 21 and 15, good morning. We may start with the active. Proceed to the right after runway 16 close to us, fixed wing.
So good start on engine 2. Engine start selector goes back to normal. Start the stopwatch, looking for 5 minutes there for the engine warm up. We'll probably take the ignition later on again. APU can come off. Engine anti-ice can go on. Reset the rudder trim. Arm the spoilers. Flaps 1 for the takeoff today, and the trim is up 0.5. Check the doors, we can see that the cabin crew have armed the doors.
Q21 and 15, monitor tower 1176.
So we're all good there. The after start checklist, anti-ice is on. ECAM status checked. Pitch trim 0.5 checked. Rudder trim 0. And the ground crew are clear. So that's the after start checklist complete. So for the taxi this morning, we just pushed back off Terminal 2. basically onto taxiway 5. So we'll continue on taxiway 5 down to link 2, and then we'll turn on to Foxtrot 1 and hold short runway 28 at Echo 1. So runway turn off light can go on, as can the taxi light. Parking brake can come off. We are clear on the right, and we're clear on the left. The aircraft does actually move under its own power at idle thrust, which is really nice to see. It's accurate. You don't get too many aircraft in sims that actually do that. So we'll just swing around to the right and join on to link 2, as I mentioned.
Operation 5 ground.
And again, I doubt that it's modelled in the sim, but we'll take the taxi and particularly the turns reasonably slowly, just to avoid skidding. So we do have a catering truck out on our left here. We'll just taxi slightly forward to avoid him. No, he's now moving. He is right in the way. Okay, he's clear now. I thought it was only Microsoft Flight Simulator that excelled in having ground scenery in the way.
Turkish 5 Romeo Zulu, thank you. Contact tower 118.6. Bye bye.
So just joining on to taxiway 5 now. And you can see this is link 2 and then left on to Foxtrot 1. So as we continue the taxi, we'll do a flight control check. So it's full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral. So coming left onto Foxtrot 1.
Turkish 5 Romeo Zulu, continue approach runway 28 left, you are number 1.
And again, just to make life a little bit easier for myself, we'll continue the taxi, we'll hold short of runway 28, and then we'll continue the before takeoff checks. I have to say it's really refreshing coming back into a sim where all the taxiways are accurate. Everything just feels a lot more close to the real world, shall we say. The weather is more accurate based on the live conditions currently. The QNH, the wind, general weather conditions are correct, which is nice. Anyway, here's the holding point for runway 28 and 34 as well, as you can see. So we'll bring the aircraft to a stop.
3.775, short 23, 22 Golf.
And park brake can go on. So we've done the flight control checks. We'll take auto brake max. Takeoff config tests. Same with the fly-by-wire mod. I'm not actually sure how we clear the cabin check on the ECAM. I'll have to go and look that up at a later date, but we'll say it's been done for now. We've seated the cabin crew. And we'll turn the weather radar on. Tilt can go to 4 degrees. Looks like the predictive wind shear is in op. And we'll take the ignition for the takeoff with the current wet conditions. So for the takeoff briefing, it's runway 28. It's the Dexon 1 Alpha departure, which is straight ahead initially and then a left turn, climbing to an altitude of 9,000 feet. And we have climb nav blue 9,000. Interestingly, not getting any weather radar returns on my nav display there, just the first officers. Not quite sure why that would be. We're not on terrain, and we do have the ND brightness turned up. Another thing I'll have to look into later on. Anyway, the before takeoff checklists.
Twilight 16, take the third right at the hotel 1 and then left after runway 16.
So, load sheet has been acknowledged, flight controls are checked, flight instruments checked, briefing is confirmed, flap setting, it's config 1, V-speed thrust, we have 143, 145 and flex, ECAM memo, takeoff and we'll say no blue. Below the line, takeoff runway is runway 28, confirmed. Cabin crew have been advised, engine start selector, ignition, and the packs are on. So that's the before takeoff checklist complete. Can't see an awful lot on the arrival, but it does look clear. Can't see any traffic for runway 28 on TCAS. We'll say that we are cleared for the takeoff. So strobes can come on, landing lights on, and the nose light to take off. Parking brake off. And we'll taxi forward onto runway 28. There's our 5 minutes for the engine warm-up. And runway 28's out at our 1 o'clock there. We also have runway 34 just off to the right. So very important that we don't get the runways mixed up. And you can see the wind is more or less straight down runway 28, just a slight crosswind from the left there.
Operation 5, continue left onto the runway 34 left for the reference to the jet hangar report.
Hopefully once we get above all this cloud the weather should be a little bit nicer. Anyway, it's runway 28. Takeoff. So up to 50% N1, wait for the engines to stabilise. They're stable.
Q15, continue into the air, the whiskey is hold short to it and 34, and you can call for a run on 34.
Says Manflex 60, SRS runway, auto thrust blue. Thrust set, 100 knots.
Find a flight select uniform, hello, identified here to be pan, free speed, flight level 120.
B1 rotate.
Pan, free speed, flight level 120 and then 5 seconds.
And nav. We'll get the autopilot in nice and early given the conditions. Didn't mean to do that. And it's positive climb, gear up. So we have nav, autopilot 1. Just continuing the climb straight ahead initially up to 1500 feet. Entering into the cloud layer now by the looks of it. There's climb. So we'll bring the thrust levers back to the climb detent. Thrust climb, climb, auto thrust. Passing through S speed. So flap 0, speed is checked. Flap 0. And accelerating all the way up to 250 knots.
I affirm in the QH 09 or 78.
Flaps are up. So, runway turn off light and taxi light off. We'll disarm the spoilers.
55 and 5 connected.
Still passing in and out of the cloud at the moment, so we'll leave the engine anti-ice on. And we'll leave the cabin crew set down for a little bit longer as well. No more precipitation by the looks of it, so the ignition can go back to normal. There's transition. And standard set. And cross-checked. Just starting the turn now. The 9,000 foot altitude restriction is based on air traffic control, so we'll assume now that we've been cleared up to our cruising flight level, which today is flight level 370. 370. So we have out blue, flight level 370. We should see out cruise blue there actually. And going off the first officer's nav display, it looks like we'll be clear of any significant weather. Yeah, not sure, again, not sure why we're not getting any weather on our side. Anyway. So we're clear of the cloud now, we'll let the cabin crew work. Just leave the engine anti-ice on a touch longer. We're clear of the icing conditions, but just want to make sure that we've cleared any ice deposits, obviously. And passing through 10,000 feet now, landing lights can come off. And we'll turn the engine anti-ice off. So we need to be above flight level 120 at Dexon. Obviously no problem there, we've only got 1,000 feet to go until we're above that. And the after takeoff checklist, landing gear is up, flaps are up, packs are on. That's the after takeoff checklist complete. So basically just heading back over towards Dublin now. You can see the airport on the nav display. Unfortunately with the cloud around we might not be able to actually spot the airport.
Rider 9 Romeo Kilo, hello, identified time, flight level 120. And flight level 120 and 9 Romeo Kilo.
This particular weather radar is actually different to the type that I'm used to, so I believe I'm operating it correctly, but there might be some discrepancies there.
Rider 9 Romeo Kilo, clear direct tested, free speed.
And we'll just wait a little bit longer for the passengers. There is still a little bit of cloud up ahead. I've actually installed a cloud mod. I think the clouds look a tiny bit better now, but still the real major area of X-Plane that needs some improvement is the weather. The actual weather conditions themselves are pretty good. They're generally quite accurate, but just the weather depiction is really poor compared to both P3D and Microsoft Flight Simulator, unfortunately. So turning back out towards the east now, heading towards the English coastline. Be crossing over the Irish coast shortly.
Turkish 5 Romeo Zulu from Hotel 1. Take the second right of the Alpha Tango 4. Choice 15 Charlie.
Now we'll be heading over the Irish Sea initially, of course. So happy that we're clear of the weather now. We'll release the passengers.
Turkish 5 Romeo Zulu in read that. Copy that up.
You can stop the stopwatch. I just leave that up as a reminder to myself that the passengers are still sat down. Obviously on a short sector like this we want to let everyone up as soon as we can so they have a little bit of time to stretch their legs before the top of descent. Anyway, that's basically us for now. We'll just continue up to cruising flight level 370 as I say. We'll head out over the Irish coastline, over the Irish Sea, and then crossing through northern Wales and western England into Heathrow. So as usual we'll head outside now, we'll take in some of the scenery, and then we'll come back just before the top of descent for the aircraft setup and the arrival briefing. So welcome back to the flight deck. We're about 5 minutes away from the top of descent now. I've already set up the box for the arrival for the most part, but we'll go through a few things together briefly. So for the flight plan itself, we have the ILS-27 left with the Bovingdon 1 Bravo. Looks like the chart's actually changed since the nav database was introduced onto this aircraft. It looks like it's now the Nugra 1 hotel arrival. Same thing essentially anyway. Already checked that on the flight plan, so we'll take that in towards the Bovingdon VOR and then we'll vector ourselves for the ILS-27 left. Right now I've just left auto tuning. For the performance we just need to enter the arrival data. So the ILS 27 left, the MDA is 277. Just keep an eye on our top of descent as well. And the weather this morning at Heathrow. We have wind variable at 2 knots, temperatures -1, QNH 1005.
There's 774, good morning, land from X-ray center. Good morning, climate to 8.
So we'll just put 270 at 2. So the arrival information is set up. For the descent, it wants to fly a managed descent at 273 knots. In terms of speed restrictions on the arrival, first speed restriction is 220 knots, so we'll just let it fly a managed descent as far as the speed is concerned. And in the progress page we'll put Heathrow 27 left, just to give us a nice distance to touchdown. I believe at this time of the morning they would be using 27 left, and it's beneficial to us anyway, so we'll be parking at Terminal 2. So the box is set up, we'll take auto brake low for the landing. Landing weight's good. In terms of the briefing then, expecting the Bovingdon, or rather the Nugra 1 Hotel arrival on the chart, and the Bovingdon 1, what did we say it was? Bovingdon 1 Bravo in the box. Obviously usually you wouldn't have a mismatch between the two, but again it's just a case of the nav database perhaps not being completely up to date. So Bovingdon 1 Bravo, basically take that in from waypoint Nugra. There's a couple of altitude constraints on the way down. I'm going to let the aircraft fly everything managed as much as possible just to see how well it handles it. So the first restriction we have is at Tobid, flight level 200, and then another restriction at flight level 150 at Soppit, down to flight level 70 at Bovingdon, and 220 knots with a hold if we need it. Next we have the ILS 27 left. It's plate 50-3, it's 109.5, India Lima Lima. Final approach track is 270 on my chart, 271 in the box, so again a slight discrepancy there due to the nav database. Aerodrome elevation 83 feet. There's a profile check at 7.5 DME, 2,500 feet, down to the MDA of 277, and the missed approach is climb runway heading to 1,000 feet, and then a left turn climbing initially to 2,000 feet. For the terrain, there's nothing too significant around. We do have a little bit out to the south of the airport. The MSA is 2,200 feet. Weather, as we mentioned, it's not a particularly nice morning at Heathrow. It's 10 k's viz, but overcast at 500 feet. So it's good enough for the Cat 1 ILS, but we're not expecting to come visual until quite late on the approach. And -1, so if we do encounter any moisture, then expecting to use the anti-ice. We'll set flight level 200 now. We'll start our descent very shortly. We can start coming down now. It says descent out blue, flight level 200. As I say, we'll let the aircraft fly it managed as much as possible and see how well it copes with that. Looks like we do have a vertical profile, so yeah, looking promising. So the ILS is briefed, weather and terrain have been briefed. For the runway itself, landing on 27 left, we use auto brake low as I mentioned, idle reverse, and aiming to vacate somewhere on the right, probably around November 5 Whiskey, and then taxiing back on Alpha and then Bravo for Terminal 2. For the fuel this morning, we've nominated Gatwick as our alternate. We need 1.8 tonnes for Gatwick. Expecting to arrive with 3.9 tonnes, so roughly an extra 2 tonnes of fuel. So we have just under an hour's extra fuel, which makes sense as we'd planned for the extra fuel on arrival this morning with the weather being as it was at Heathrow. So that's it for the brief. Obviously we've already started our descent now, and the aircraft seems to be doing a nice job of managing that.
Oh, good morning, Ryanair. 774 plus 2,400 level 9 0 BT6 up. Ryanair 774 Dublin, good day, identified. Flight level 120.
Yeah, so as far as the Flight Factor A320 goes, I have to say I'm really impressed with the aircraft. It's more than anything just a really, really nice, immersive experience. It really does feel quite similar to sitting in the aircraft in some ways, obviously not in every aspect. And the systems seem to be modelled very nicely so far. Everything's worked as it should, more or less. Seems that the MTDU is very well modelled. The aircraft seems to fly and manage all the modes very nicely. And obviously it's a very short sector and we're still getting used to the aircraft, but so far I'm really enjoying the experience. So yeah, big thumbs up here to the Flight Factor A320. If I was being picky, one of my small gripes is that you only get the CFM engine variant. It seems to me that with an add-on of this price point you should get both engine variants. I know there is a mod around to get the IE variant and I'll probably look into that at some point, but yeah, it'd be nice to have both out of the box. Obviously it does limit your airline selection a little bit more if you want to be realistic and you only have the CFM engines. But again, it's a pretty minor gripe. So far I'm pretty much yeah, loving everything I've seen from the Flight Factor A320. Which bodes well, as I did also pick up the Flight Factor 757, so we'll definitely do a couple of flights in that at some point. Looking forward to giving that a go. From what I've read, it's perhaps not up to quite the same standards as the 320, but even if it's half as good as this, it should still be quite good fun. Anyway, just coming up on 30,000 feet shortly, so we'll need about 120 track miles to run, 110 in the box, so overall we are slightly high on the profile, but obviously we're following the altitude constraints. About 10,000 feet to lose until Tobid, and we have 40 miles to run, so that's looking good. We do have a couple of speed constraints on the way down, as you can see. The first one, 250 knots at Whiskey Charlie Oscar.
I'm level 1 to Ryanair,
Fortunately, the weather this morning hasn't been very conducive to sightseeing. Even coming over the English coast, couldn't really see very much of that, which is a shame. The ortho scenery in X-Plane really is quite amazing. Even at zoom level 15, which is what I'm using today, it's so much crisper and clearer than you get in P3D. And I have to say, sadly, I am falling out of love a little bit with P3D at this point. I've been a big fan and a long-term user of P3D, but it's starting to lose its luster a little bit now. Certainly starting to show its age a little bit. And many of you might have seen on my channel I've been doing flights around the Mach Loop in P3D, as it's really the most appropriate sim for that currently. But yeah, if I have the graphics settings fully turned up, then unfortunately I can't get anywhere near a decent frame rate. And I find that when I crank them all the way down, the frame rate is pretty acceptable, but then I get this strange flashing on the screen. So yeah, compared to X-Plane, P3D just not looking quite so glowing these days. And X-Plane is rapidly becoming my favourite sim. In fact, it is my favourite sim now for heavy jet flying. The quality of the add-ons that I've seen is really good, and the sim just handles everything really nicely. Unlike with Microsoft Flight Simulator, you can pretty much base all your planning on real-world conditions, which is a real bonus for me. And yeah, it just makes operating the aircraft much more enjoyable.
Turn right, direct rudder.
So we'll shortly be coming up on 6,000 feet to our restriction at Tobid, which means we need about 24 track miles. We're just coming up on 20 miles now, so that's still looking good. As I think I mentioned before, 4 times your altitude is a good conservative rule of thumb for a descent. If you manage your whole profile based on that, they'll work out quite nicely with the deceleration as well. But 3 times your altitude is pretty achievable in the Airbus with no issues. So right now we really only need 18 miles to get to Tobid, which is roughly what the aircraft's given us. That seems plausible, so I'm happy with that. I think we'll get the seatbelt signs turned on a little bit earlier as we are entering back into some weather. Although there's nothing painting on the weather radar currently. You can see the Bovingdon VOR just out at our 11 o'clock, about 60 miles to run. Usually I suspect we'd get ATC vectoring from Bovingdon, but today obviously we'll be vectoring ourselves onto a downwind for the ILS 27 left.
7256, there's a grid, runway 28 left, seat and 5 on departure, call 2270.
I have no idea when X-Plane 12 is coming out, but I believe it's sometime in the foreseeable future, and if they can just nail the weather depiction in the sim, X-Plane may well even take the top spot. I presume there will be some graphical improvements overall in the sim, and if they can get it up to that point, then I don't see why it wouldn't be rivaling Microsoft Flight Simulator, to be frank. One would assume as well there'll be a lot more cross-compatibility with add-ons, so already off the bat we'll probably have some more sophisticated add-ons as well. But anyway, obviously I'm speculating a lot there, who knows what the future holds for X-Plane, but hopefully things are looking bright. A little bit brighter than the weather conditions that we have today. Even having this tablet here is a very nice function. So far the functionality seems to be fairly basic, but from what I've seen it looks like we can quite possibly have a map running, and maybe get our charts up on there as well at some point, so definitely some nice functionality there. So approaching waypoint Tobid, we're still on profile, so that's looking good. After Tobid we descend down to flight level 150 by Soppit, so that means we need to lose another 5,000 feet, which means we need about 20 miles, so again that's looking pretty reasonable in terms of what we can achieve in the descent without having to intervene ourselves. So not only is the aircraft managing the descent very nicely, but the profile that the Nugra 1 hotel arrival gives us is obviously quite a decent profile. Going into some airports trying to achieve the desired profile can be quite tricky, and in others it's all planned out very nicely. Obviously it depends on various circumstances, including terrain and adjoining airspace, things of that nature. So speed out star. As soon as we pass over Tobid we'll descend down to flight level 150.
There, 774, contact Scottish 128.055, goodbye.
So it's thrust descent out blue, flight level 150, just a touch high on the profile now. If we need to we can just intervene with speed to get back on profile, but the aircraft itself gives us an extra 20 knots if we need it. And as you can see right now it's taking the extra speed to get us back on our vertical profile. So once again the aircraft doing a really great job of managing the profile for us here. Really pleased to see that. And again very refreshing having come from the default Microsoft Flight Simulator Airbus, where its profile management is just all over the shop. So back on profile now. You can see shortly after Soppit we'll be decelerating at our deceleration point, this magenta bug here, down to 250 knots for Whiskey Charlie Oscar. Temperature outside is minus 30 degrees now, so we'll need the engine anti-ice on just before we enter the cloud. – 18,000 feet. So we need about 72 track miles to descend. And we have about 65 miles to run. So again we are slightly high overall, but no concern at the moment. Also the flight plan has us travelling direct from Bovingdon straight towards the initial fix for the ILS, and we'll be flying more of a downwind leg, so a few extra track miles there for the descent. Still nothing painting on the weather radar, so obviously pretty benign conditions up ahead. After Soppit we have the flight level 70 restriction at Bovingdon. That's not actually in the box, but it is on the chart, so we'll put that in now. The aircraft's planned to be at 70 anyway, but we'll just harden that up by tuning it. So now we have flight level 70 at Bovingdon. So that's 3-1 to go, coming off on flight level 150 now. And again, we're about 6 track miles shy of what we need for the descent, but no issues there. Speed out star. As soon as we pass over Soppet, we'll set 70. In theory, we could have actually just set 70 and managed the descent all the way down, but trying to mimic air traffic control giving us descents here. So it's thrust idle, descent out blue, flight level 70. And again, we're trending a little bit high on profile there, but we'll take the extra speed for now to get us back on profile. It may be that we'll have to use a little bit of speed brake as we start to decelerate. The aircraft reckons we're about 800 feet high now.
Fine, hello, I'm like this is back. Negative, still working on that temperature, and then I'm not able to leave. I'm up for 4%. Okay, I'm not able to blue green.
The transition level going into London is by air traffic control, generally speaking. Transition altitude is 6,000 feet. And the box reckons the transition altitude is 5,000 there. We'll put 8,000. Just a hypothetical level, but... So the aircraft's starting to decelerate now. We'll take a little bit of speed brake to help get the speed back and the descent continuing. And of course the 250 knot restriction also has us covered for our 250 knots below 10,000 feet. We'll shortly be entering the cloud layer, so we'll turn the engine anti-ice on. And we'll just keep the speed brake out until we're back on profile.
Wait for takeoff 28 left, right there. I'm not down to 2 points.
Actually, as it's flight level 70 at Bovingdon, it wouldn't make sense that the transition altitude would be 8,000 feet. So we'll call it 6,000.
Bravo, that's approved, or it's not charged.
As you can see, slowly regaining profile now.
Push Bravo, I'm going to start it on it. 75 QNH, 978.
And that's looking good. So we'll stay the speed brakes. And just coming through 10,000 feet. So landing lights can go on. I'm going to turn the LS on. Nice little touch with the PA there. There are a couple of other PAs as well, but I didn't try them for the sake of the video. So currently we have India Bravo Bravo as the ILS. If I had to hazard a guess, I would imagine that's probably Birmingham, but we're looking for India Lima Lima. That should auto-tune later on, hopefully.
978 next pass, I'll try and go back.
84, secured ILS approach, retrace left, report stop.
Again, even though you can't generally hear the sounds that we're listening to right now in the real aircraft, it does really add to the immersion. I do like it. I'm personally in the camp that I don't really mind if it's not realistic. I think anything that makes things feel more immersive is always a plus point to me. Generally it's nice if you have the option, I suppose, but anyway, I like it. So approaching 1 to go. As I said, from Bovingdon we'll basically head straight to the fix for the ILS.
QNH 0987.
Intercepting the ILS at 2,500 feet, so we'll just start descending down to 2,500 feet after we pass the Bovingdon restriction. But yeah, I really can't sing the aircraft's praises highly enough when it comes to managing that descent. It did an absolutely flawless job, so again, very, very impressed with the Flight Factor A320 so far. Speed out star. Be interesting to see how the aircraft handles on the approach and particularly on the landing. Heading. So we've passed over Bovingdon now, which was our last waypoint before the discontinuity. The aircraft's automatically gone into heading, which is why we heard that triple click there. It's a mode reversion. We'll start our descent down now to 2,500 feet.
22115, Monitor Tower 117.
And we've got 7,000 feet to lose. Roughly 25 track miles to run. So we're roughly on profile. We'll descend at around 1,500 feet for now. That should do a good job. It says VS minus 1500 out blue, 2,500. Technically still above the MSA at that point. And you can see thanks to our blue descent arrow where we're actually going to be level. Really nice again, that helps us quite a lot. You can see we're actually going to be level before the fix, so we'll ease off on that descent rate slightly. That we can even come back to 1,000 feet a minute for now. And we'll start turning ourselves towards the ILS fairly soon. Yeah, hopefully the aircraft will behave itself on the landing. That will certainly be quite refreshing, having flown the Microsoft Flight Simulator default A320 quite a lot recently. That becomes a bit of a chore sometimes trying to land the thing.
And Romeo, Kilo close stream, pass on your right side shortly. Stay behind that traffic taxi, go to Sierra and hold short.
So we'll go selected speed now. We'll activate the approach phase. Approach phase is activated. It's the ILS 27 left. Be passing through transition just a moment. And the QNH is now 1005 according to SkyVector. So it's transition. So it's QNH 1005 set and cross-checked. For the approach checklist then, briefing has been confirmed, ECAM status is checked, seatbelts on, barrel ref QNH 1005 set, minimum, barrel 277 set, engine start selector, normal. That's the approach checklist complete. Coming on 5,000 feet to run, about 18 miles to go, still looking good there. We'll start reducing the speed now though, come back to 220 knots initially. Still showing India Bravo Bravo on the ILS at the moment. Big pop in again with the weather, it's a little bit disappointing. It's one of the things, as I say, I really don't like about X-Plane. We'll ease off on the descent rate again just to let the speed come back.
Operation 5 ground.
We do have India Lima Lima in the box as we checked earlier, so the ILS should auto-tune sooner rather than later. And we'll take direct to the ILS now. So it's direct India Lima Lima 75, can insert that. It's nav India Lima Lima 75. Take flaps 1, speed is checked, flaps 1. Coming back to 180 knots now, that should help us in the turn a little. And we're a touch high now, so we'll go open descent and take some speed brake. Just to help get the aircraft down. So let's thrust aisle open descent. We now have India Lima Lima tuned for the ILS. And that's showing correctly for the localizer on the PFD.
Turkish 5 Romeo Zulu, thank you. Contact tower 118.6. Bye bye.
It's through 5,000 feet, so we can seat the cabin crew. So profile's looking pretty good now. Still waiting for the glide slope. Just coming into the cloud layer now. The engine anti-ice is on.
Do one left tapping, hold short on way to left. Twilight 16, take the third right on the hotel 1 and then left on the runway 16, hold short on the way to 8 left on runway 16.
Just one to go.
Operation 5, continue left on the runway 34 left for the left for the CJ hangar report.
So we'll be levelling off shortly, we'll get rid of the speed brake. That's speed VS minus 500. Still on a glide slope, a little bit strange. We'll arm the approach. See what that does for us. It says Cat 3 dual, autopilot 1 and 2, glide slope low blue. There's the glide slope just coming in now. Take flaps 2, speed's checked. Flaps 2. There's out star, low star. Should capture the glide slope very shortly. There's glide slope star. And the missed approach altitude, 2,000 feet. Take the gear down. Bring the speed back to 160 knots now. It's glide slope. Flaps 3, speed is checked. Flaps 3. Loc. And flaps full, speed checked. Flaps full. Landing checklist, cabin crew have been advised. Auto thrust, speed, auto brake, low, ECAM memo, landing no blue. It's the landing checklist complete. Okay, manage speed. Again, very hazy, can't really make out the runway yet.
You're on 5, continue with Sierra, the whiskey, hold short to 8 left and 3-4, and you can spot for a run on 3-4.
So 4 DME, we should be 1,400 feet. No DME for the ILS, not sure if that's the case or not at Heathrow in real world. I suspect that's inaccurate because we do have a DME on the chart. And back into the cloud layer. As we said, it's broken at around 600 feet, so it may be that we're not actually visual until 600 feet.
And 5 up.
Just realised I'm not sure if my controls are assigned correctly or not for the autopilot disconnect, so we might have to do that with the mouse, which would be a little bit inconvenient. See how we go there.
1,000.
It's checked, stable.
Line of 5 Quebec uniform, hello, identified here to B-pan, free speed, climb flight level 120. B-pan, free speed, climb flight level 120, line of 5 Quebec uniform. 0, frequency airborne 132, that's 580, target start 0935. That's 774, read back correct, thank you. Flight 160 QNH 0978, on the tower 118, that's 165.
500.
Checked. Okay, visual, we'll try disconnecting. Yeah, seems to work nicely. So it's Cat 1.
400.
And just hand flying the aircraft a touch. Obviously not too much in terms of correction here, but the aircraft feeling pretty responsive as I would expect. So again, that's nice to see.
Minimum.
Continue. Again, certainly a huge improvement over the default Microsoft Flight Simulator Airbus currently.
50, 40, 30, 20, retard.
So coming back on the thrust. It's touchdown.
5 in here, 5 connecting to the body.
And spoilers, rev green decel. We'll start slowing the aircraft down for the next exit on the right. A little bit of fiddling around there to remember how the reverse thrust works in this sim. The rudder a little bit sensitive there, but overall I'd say yeah, the aircraft very nice. The only thing, the flare attitude felt a little bit low there. Might just be the way I have the camera view set up though. So we'll vacate to the right. This is November 5 Whiskey as we were expecting. So it's November 5 Whiskey as we expected. We'll take straight across onto Romeo. And then we'll join onto Bravo. And then we'll just taxi down for Terminal 2A.
774, pushing start to cruise, QNH 978.
Not too fussed about where we're parking here, but I believe the Aer Lingus do actually park at Terminal 2. So after landing we can turn the landing lights off. Engine anti-ice can go off now. Should have got the taxi light when we took the gear down there. Disarm the spoilers, flaps can come up. Be a short taxi so we'll get the APU fired up.
5
Romeo Zulu, good morning. Continue taxi Whiskey 1, hold short, runway 3.
So this has us for Bay 301, that's still part of Terminal 3, we don't want that. Carry out the after landing checklist. So the after landing checklist: flaps retracted, spoilers disarmed, APU starting, radar is off, and the predictive wind shear is off. That's the after landing checklist complete. So 223 is a stand at Terminal 2, so we'll take that. So taxi light can come off. Again, really nice to have correct stands.
Pilot 16 line up runway 28 left and right. That's 28 left.
APU is available. No docking guidance or marshaller, which is a little bit of a shame, but can't expect everything from X-Plane. So we'll just bring ourselves to a stop in roughly the correct location. So the aircraft stationary, park brake is on, APU is available, APU bleed can go on, and we'll shut down the engines. Again, all the power transients and things like that, it's just such an immersive aircraft.
124, that's the right now, 5
So seatbelts can go off. The slides have been disarmed, so the beacon can go off. If I can get it. Transponder off. And the fuel pumps can go off.
Ryder 9 Romeo Kilo, hello, identified flying flight level 120. And flight level 120 right now, 9 Romeo Kilo.
Sounds like the cabin already getting ready to disembark behind us.
Ryder 9 Romeo Kilo, clear to direct passes, free speed.
So the parking checklist: APU bleed is on, engines off, Seatbelts off, external lights set. We should have got the strobes there. A couple of omissions on my part today. Fuel pumps off and the park brake is on. So that's the parking checklist complete. We'll shortly get the aircraft doors open, we'll have everyone disembarking off the air bridge, and then it'll be a very quick turnaround for us back over towards Dublin. So there you go guys, I do hope that you enjoyed our first trip out in the Flight Factor Airbus A320. As I'm sure you could tell from the video, I really enjoyed my time in the aircraft. I'm very impressed with the add-on so far. Obviously that was quite a short and fairly basic trip, but the aircraft seemed to handle everything very nicely and certainly, as I said, a very immersive and enjoyable experience. I think it's fair to say that the fidelity of the Flight Factor Airbus A320 is good enough that we can now start to consider doing some more in-depth Airbus tutorials on the channel. For now though, we'll leave things here. As always, I do hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Once again, it's the best thing that you can do to help the channel grow. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them down in the comments section below. I always try my best to come back with a reply. But for now, thanks very much, and I'll see you all again soon.